USA surrenders and ceases attacks against the Houthis. Trump proclaims a hollow victory, but has to leave Yemen free to continue its blockade of Israel. After promising to completely annihilate the Houthis, the USA has been forced into an abrupt U-turn. Trump may bluster about victory, but the truth is that the Yemenis have dealt a humiliating defeat to the combined naval and air power of the Western imperialist powers, which spent as much as $1 billion in a few weeks, lost a huge amount of military hardware and gained absolutely nothing. The following article has been translated from the Punto Rojo blog, with thanks. After 2 months of sustained attacks against Yemen, the United States has announced its decision to abandon the costly military campaign. US President Donald Trump has tried to disguise this measure as part of a ceasefire agreement, but the reality is that the bombings have been a resounding failure and have resulted in enormous expenses for the Pentagon. On the contrary, the unilateral US withdrawal represents a victory for Yemen's Supreme Political Council government, led by the Ansar Allah movement, also known as the Houthis. Not only has it managed to resist pressure from the US-led coalition to abandon the Gaza Strip amid the genocide perpetrated by Israel, but it has also succeeded in dividing its enemy, isolating Tel Aviv at a time when it is intensifying its blockade campaign. A victory for the Houthis. On the afternoon of 6th May, President Trump told reporters in the Oval Office, "The Houthis said, they don't want to fight anymore. We will honour that and stop the bombing. They have capitulated. They said, please don't bomb us anymore and we will not attack your ships." The Republican president thus announced the suspension of airstrikes in Yemen. Washington has sought to present this result as a victory, since American ships will be able to sail again in the Red Sea. However, this was never about the United States, but about Israel. It was the USA that initiated the bombing of Yemen to disrupt the naval blockade imposed on the Zionist state by the Houthis in response to the genocide in the Gaza Strip. The Yemeni group maintains that it will stop attacking US military ships if Washington halts its campaign, but that we will definitely continue our operations in support of Gaza. The Ansar Allah movement was clear on this point when on March the 1st it issued an ultimatum to the Zionist army to lift the siege on Gaza, giving it 4 days to comply. That day, Israel had broken the ceasefire by blocking the entry of all humanitarian aid into Palestinian territory, aiming to force a famine that continues more than 60 days later. At the end of the ultimatum, the Houthis reimposed their naval blockade against Israel. Subsequent actions depended entirely on the reaction of other global actors. If there has been a confrontation with the United States, it is because the White House made the decision to launch a campaign of attacks against Yemen in aid of Tel Aviv on the 15th of March. However, as with the Biden administration more than a year ago, the Trump administration has been unable to put a dent in the commitment of Yemeni fighters. Attacks on commercial vessels have been linked to enforcing this blockade against the Zionists, but they have not been the primary objective. Countries that have not interfered in Yemeni operations have not been affected. Although the Trump administration has characterized the Houthi attacks as targeting US commercial vessels, The reality is that the actions against the United States have primarily targeted warships and drones involved in the bombing of Yemen. In fact, although the Trump administration has characterized the Houthi attacks as targeting US commercial vessels, the reality is that the actions against the United States have primarily targeted warships and drones involved in the bombing of Yemen. They have attacked US destroyers with cruise missiles, drones and anti-ship missiles. The last known Houthi attack on US commercial vessels occurred in December 2024, before Trump's inauguration, when US warships were escorting 3 US flagged vessels en route to Djibouti. Since Trump came to power in January 2025, there have been no further such attacks, as Yemeni operation has been so effective that most commercial vessels have been deterred from entering the Red Sea. The attacks against US forces were not being made purely in Yemen's national interest, but in support of Palestine, recognizing that USA plays the main role in supporting Israeli genocide in Gaza. In short, the deal can be summarized as follows. The Houthis will stop attacking US ships in the Red Sea, and the United States will leave Yemen alone to continue its blockade of Israel. The Houthis have always followed this principle of self-defense and have no interest in concentrating their efforts on attacking the US power at this time. In this way, the Ansar Allah movement has proven to be true to its promise, both during the ceasefire that began in January and afterward. The Solidarity Front with Palestine has been opened and closed in coordination with the resistance forces and according to their needs. This, according to their logic, is the best way they can support the Palestinian people, not by insisting on an unnecessary military escalation, but by calibrating their forces and using them to keep the front open against Israel, while simultaneously creating a gap with the United States. Back in April, a senior Ansar Allah leader told Dropsite News that if the United States ends its campaign against Yemen, Houthi forces would commit to halting all attacks on US vessels in the region. We do not consider ourselves at war with the American people, declared Mohammed al-Bakhaiti, a member of Ansar Allah's political bureau and spokesman for the Houthis. If the United States stops attacking Yemen, we will cease our military operations against it. As stated through their press office, our military operations in support of Gaza will not cease until the aggression against Gaza stops and the blockade on its residents is lifted, allowing the entry of food, medicine and fuel. As for our attacks on the USA, they fall within the context of the right to self-defense. If it halts its attacks on us, we will halt our attacks on it. This position also applies to Britain. We are committed to our operations in support of Gaza, regardless of the sacrifices it costs us. If the USA persists with its operations in support of the Zionist entity, even if they are immoral, the only way to stop the war and avoid escalation is for the USA to pressure Netanyahu to respect the terms of the ceasefire agreement. At that point, we will halt all our military operations in the Red Sea and deep within the Zionist entity. US objectives in Yemen. Like Joe Biden's Democrats, the new Republican administration has failed in its attempts to defeat Ansar Allah. In early April, the New York Times reported that in just 3 weeks, the Pentagon had used $200 million worth of munitions in Operation Rough Rider. In closed-door briefings, Pentagon officials have acknowledged that success in destroying the Houthis' vast, largely underground arsenal of missiles, drones and launchers has been limited. The total cost could well exceed $1 billion. Had it wanted to continue operations, the Pentagon would almost certainly have had to request supplemental funding from Congress. The United States has had to use so many precision munitions, especially advanced long-range ones, that some Pentagon contingency planners became concerned about the Navy's total stockpile and the implications for any situation in which Washington would need to deter a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Maintaining operations in Yemen was unsustainable. During the course of these operations, the United States has lost 22 MQ-9 Reaper drones, each worth around $30 million, and 3 FA-18 Hornet fighter jets worth approximately $55 million each. In total, US operations in the region, including Yemen, have already cost the US government $4.86 billion over the course of 18 months. Washington even expanded the operation's deployment by sending a second aircraft carrier, the USS Carl Vinson, to support the USS Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group, which has lost 2 fighter jets in the past 2 weeks, allegedly due to having to perform evasive manoeuvres to avoid being hit by the Houthis. The Pentagon also deployed 6 B-2 bombers to the US airbase on Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, 1/3 of its entire fleet. On the other hand, although CENTCOM, the US Regional Command overseeing Middle East operations, claims to have struck more than 800 targets in Yemen, the truth is that many of them were not military targets at all. This reflects one of the operation's main problems, the lack of intelligence. The United States lacks local assets who can gather reliable information and compile targets. This has led to episodes in which open source data has been used to identify military targets. In one case, this resulted in the killing of 8 civilians, including a woman and a child, after an X account published a satellite photo of homes claiming to contain an underground Houthi base. CENTCOM confirmed to journalist Ryan Grimm that it had obtained military targets using these methods, apparently without verifying the information. The United States has simply realised that continuing this war is pointless, opting for the pragmatic path and leaving Israel in the lurch. The American power has finally given in because it cannot dent the Houthis' will. However, if we dig a little deeper, we can better understand Washington's motivation. In the signal leaks about the Yemen attacks, Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth acknowledged that this is not about the Houthis. I see it as 2 things. 1, restoring freedom of navigation, a core national interest, and 2, restoring deterrence, which Biden gutted. The goal was to create a narrative, and in that, the Trump administration may have succeeded, even if the rest has been a failure. It can now proclaim that it has restored freedom of navigation, even though the naval and now air blockade remains in place. It can also boast that it has re-established deterrence, even though nothing has changed and the Houthis' position has strengthened. This act was important because there were two major risks in waiting. One, that this leaks out and we appear indecisive. Two, that Israel takes the initiative and attacks first, and we can't initiate this on our own terms. Because Washington was able to maintain the initiative, it achieved a result acceptable to its objectives, although shameful for its strategic position. Trump himself praised the bravery of the Yemeni fighters. We hit them very hard. They have a great capacity to withstand punishment. They endured tremendous punishment. You can say there is a lot of courage. What they endured was incredible, but we honour their commitment and their word. Regional context in the Middle East. Oman's mediation in negotiating this ceasefire clearly indicates the direction this process is taking. The decision is in line with the continuation of nuclear negotiations with Iran, which Israel opposes and seeks to create a favourable climate ahead of Donald Trump's visit to the Arabian Peninsula. The decision is in line with the continuation of nuclear negotiations with Iran, which Israel opposes, and seeks to create a favourable climate ahead of Donald Trump's visit to the Arabian Peninsula. The US President will be in Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, but not Tel Aviv, which is excluded. Trump has claimed he will make a very, very big and positive announcement before the trip, but did not specify what. In the Persian Gulf, there is a little appetite for a confrontation with Iran, and unlike in 2015, there is a support for a nuclear deal and an agreed resolution to the war in Yemen, from which Saudi Arabia wishes to withdraw. Therefore, by sidelining Israel, the conditions may be being created for a major agreement with Iran. The ceasefire with the Houthis is already a severe blow to the Riyadh-backed puppet government in South Yemen, which has been seeking US support for weeks to launch a new offensive against the Ansar Allah-led government in Sana'a. Washington has negotiated directly with Tehran, bypassing them. According to diplomatic sources, the USA presented the Houthis with 3 conditions in Muscat: to halt military operations, a halt to all attacks against US vessels, whether commercial or military, a halt to attacks on Israel, and the resumption of peace talks within the framework of the Saudi-led roadmap. It's clear that Ansar Allah stood firm and only accepted the proposals they themselves had made. However, this third point indicates the possibility of a comprehensive agreement that would reduce tensions and ensure the continuity of the agreements between Iran and Saudi Arabia, potentially resulting in a Saudi withdrawal from the conflict in exchange for recognition of the Houthi government in Sana'a. Thus, the unilateral US withdrawal from its failed campaign in Yemen makes any future ground offensive against Ansar Allah by local proxy forces completely unviable, while in Israel, now left alone in its attempt to halt the ongoing Yemeni attacks against it.